Welcome to Soul Care with Stevie Boy. If it's your first time, I'm more than flattered. I'm so gratified that you would click it up and tune it in. If you're a return friend, I am honored that you would do that. We're in the book of First Peter, and slowly making our way through the first chapter. We're ready for verse 17. We talked a little bit about verse 17, the first majority of that verse last time. Since you call on a Father who judges each person's work impartially, live out your time as foreigners here in reverent fear. I talked about it's just such a temptation for us to lose sight of the fact that we're only temporary residents. We are not, in the truest sense of the word, we are not citizens here. Our citizenship is elsewhere. So Peter writes, live out your life, your time here as foreigners. It gets way easy to get so attached to our life here and how it is, and in fact, to what we don't like about how it is, that we lose this awareness and sensitivity to the fact that we're just foreigners. This world is not our home. Then he goes on to say, so live here in reverent fear. That's an interesting phrase and easy to misunderstand, and in fact not easy to open up for meaning. Start with reverence. What does it mean to show reverence? How am I reverent? Well, the root of the word is to revere, and that has to do with honor. But it's not just the, wow, you're the greatest kind of honor, or here's a medal kind of honor. It's you deserve worship honor. It honestly, our reverence for God is the keynote, the cornerstone for our relationship to Him. It's one of the primary expressions of to what degree we are really in relationship with God. If you know God and you understand His nature and character even a little, you realize He's absolute perfection, and that deserves our reverence. There's many other aspects of God's nature that point to the fact that He deserves our reverence. And we live in a culture that is, reverence is not an unknown or foreign subject to our culture. It's just that we give reverence to a lot of wacky, dumb things. Our culture tends to give reverence to celebrity. That I suppose I could be overstating it, but I don't think by very much when I say athletes, actors, politicians, the wealthy. We tend to show reverence as a culture for these people, which is why if you read as I do in my social media comments from actors and athletes who many of them don't have a very deep, broad education, but they have opinions. And when they voice an opinion, the world tunes in as though their opinion should have greater weight than somebody else's. Can you tell it gets under my skin? And even though not every celebrity is working from dark motives or is a bad person or whatever, they don't have to agree with me politically, but that's the point I'm trying to make. I'm taking us far afield from the actual point, because the actual point is reverence. Reverence, real true reverence, has to be reserved for the one and the only who deserves reverence. This is honor. Respect, yes, but beyond respect. This is honor. This, you worship those for whom you have reverence. And for the Christian, there can be no one who deserves our worship above God. Well, duh. Kindergarten kids know that. Yeah. But sometimes we don't manage to get it into our lives the way we ought. And so, but Peter writes, live out your time here as foreigners in reverent fear. Now, that's a difficult thing. I think in some ways, culturally, we've been trying to eliminate fear for, forever. Fear today is an emotion that we want to minimize, and I understand that. I've shared before quite a few times that one of my personal struggles is with anxiety, which anxiety is just fear on steroids. And fear, when it gets out of hand, produces anxiety, real anxiety that edges toward panic. That's not the kind of fear that the Apostle Peter is writing about. He's talking about the reverent fear, the worshipful fear that we ought to have toward whom? Toward God. To me, one of the times that this kind of reverent fear captured me was in 2000. Debbie and I got the chance. This was her first time to see it, and my first time to see it as an adult. I was there when I was 12, and I just thought, you'll know what I thought when I tell you what we saw. We went to the Grand Canyon, and dear friends of ours who we'd been staying with in Scottsdale right before we went to the Grand Canyon, he gave us the best advice, and he set a time for us to leave Scottsdale so we'd arrive at the Grand Canyon at sunset. And it was literally breathtaking. The first lookout point after you enter the park from the south is called Mather's Point. And we drove in, parked the car, and there was this incline you had to walk up in order to get to the observation point. When I got to the top of it, it wasn't like you get to the top and you walk out and then there's the canyon. You get to the top and there's the canyon. When we both got to the top of that incline, it literally took our breath away. We walked out to the observation point, and you look down into that canyon. It's a mile deep, and in places maybe more than a mile. It's incredible, and it's beauty that defies description. Every picture that I've seen of it, even the best pictures, are not quite as dramatic and vivid as being there to see it for myself. Well, that's the wonder of that. How could I not see? Wonder is a part of reverence, and this worship of wonder is a part of reverence. But then there's this other aspect. I'm looking at it, and one of the first things I thought was how amazing and beautiful it was. And then I thought, there is no way this happened by chance over time. This is the artistry of God. And then I thought, you know what? If I'm not a little bit afraid of whoever did this, something's wrong with me. I mean, we're having a thunderstorm here in Edmond as I'm recording this, and when the lightning flashes through the sky and then the thunder erupts as the cold air and hot air collide, if you're not a little bit afraid of the God who did that, who does that, who, according to the psalmist, controls every single bolt of lightning, something's not right. There ought to be this reality of the almightiness of God. You know, the one person in all the world I think I love most is my wife, Debbie. And I'm not really afraid of her. I should be. I mean, there's been some times I've done some very boneheaded things and I should have been very afraid. But her nature is love, not punishment or vengeance. What I fear in that relationship would be that I would take her for granted somehow. And if I were to do that, I would diminish the love in our relationship. I wonder if that's part of what Peter was talking about here with this reverent fear. I do not fear God will harm me. I'm not afraid that if I'm not perfect, he will disengage from me. I don't fear that. He's made it clear to me that he loves me absolutely and unconditionally. But there is this somehow an element of fear that I would never want to diminish the love in our relationship. I don't think it's possible to disappoint God. An omniscient being cannot be disappointed because they already know everything. So if an event happens, they already knew about it. It can't disappoint them. So my fear is not even that I will disappoint God. My fear is much more that I might somehow do something to diminish the love in our relationship. There's certainly much more to it than just that. I'm probably not the best guy in the world to try to unpack this reverent fear idea, but I know that at least it has to do with a degree of sincere worship that accounts for the majesty and the power of God. Peter writes, so live here as foreigners in reverent fear. Going to come back to that for the application. But in verse 18, he goes on, for you know that it was not with perishable things such as silver or gold that you were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors, but with the precious blood of Christ, a lamb without blemish or defect. Peter points out two of the most precious metals in the world that the recipients of his letter lived in. There were no metals, there were no substances as valuable as silver and gold. Gold most valuable, silver probably second only to that. And he calls them perishable, which is a little interesting because there are a whole lot of things that are perishable. But silver and gold, if you burn them, they only get more pure. They might liquefy, but they don't go away. They don't perish. But he is comparing these two most precious metals with what is even more precious than that. You were redeemed with something that is even more precious than these two most precious metals. You were redeemed from the empty way of life handed down to you from your ancestors. If you're an adult, you have certainly had moments when you realized your life felt empty. The only thing that can keep a life from feeling empty is purpose and meaning. Viktor Frankl he's dead now, but he was a survivor of Auschwitz. His entire family and his fiancée were killed by the Nazis in concentration camps during World War II. He made an observation as a prisoner that those men and women who found meaning in their life, who did things out of what they felt was the meaning of their life, they survived, and those who didn't perished. After he emerged from that experience, he wrote a book that I highly recommend called Man's Search for Meaning. And his idea was that when you find meaning for your life, you can endure virtually anything. I think he's right. But the most substantial meaning in life is not to help other people, to be a good person, to be a great example. That's not the most substantial meaning in life. The most substantial meaning in life, the thing that puts us where instead of this empty way of living handed down to us generation after generation after generation, the purpose, the meaning of life being doing things that make us feel good and fulfilled. We choose these things, and it's most often it's a hit and miss, a failure and success thing, trial and error. The meaning in life is real simply to find your meaning, your significance in Christ, as Christ is in you, working in you, as he refines you, develops you, shapes you. That's the highest meaning in life. And we're going to finish this up next time we get together. Again, I'm well over time, and my apologies for that. But now what I want to do is call you back to the idea of living as foreigners here in reverent fear. Don't be critical of yourself, as in criticizing, but be observational. Don't be judgmental toward yourself. Only be observational and think about your level of reverent fear. Because it's on a scale. It's not either it's there or it's not. It can be there to degrees. What degree could you estimate, that's the best any of us can do, your reverent fear of God? How are you doing with this? Live your life here as foreigners in reverent fear. What does that look like? And I don't think any of us have achieved full and complete reverence and fear. I don't think it's even possible. But is there anything you could do that would cooperate and partner with God's purposes in a way that would somehow free you to show reverent fear more often, more consistently, more completely in your life? Big question. And since I'm already almost 3 minutes over, it's time for me to shut up and turn you loose. I look forward to, I hope, seeing you again on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.